prodigal son has returned, and he's having one heck of a first season. For those of you who don't know, Louisville's first-year head coach, Jeff Brohm, was formerly a star quarterback for the Cardinals. And unlike the Scott Frost experiment in Nebraska, he's having a pretty successful first year. A lot of that has to do with a good balance of offense and defense. And the offense starts and stops with the running game. While they do run some gap stuff like counter, like you see here, they're primarily a zone running team. I particularly like what they do out of this jet series. Jet just refers to a wide receiver motioning quickly across the line of scrimmage. The easiest play out of it is to just toss him the ball and let him try to sweep to the outside. But really what that motion does is it gives eye candy to linebackers, so they can hit him back the other direction with an outside zone. They'll also run zone to the side of the motioning receiver, but often they'll do what's called split zone, where this front side tight end actually goes backside to block, hopefully opening a cutback lane again against the direction of the motioning wide receiver. When teams run split zone, they like to play games off of it, and Louisville is no exception. Here you can see initially it looks like split zone with this wide receiver working backside, but instead of blocking the end man on the line of scrimmage, he releases out into the flat for an easy completion. They can then add another layer of complexity. Here's a triple option kind of look, where this quarterback reads the defensive end. Since he crashes in, he keeps it, and then he looks at this outside backer. Since he follows the man in the flats, it opens up a running lane for the quarterback. All this eye candy and horizontal stretching of the defense has given ample running room for their running backs, and they've taken full advantage of it. Jawhar Jordan is more of a speedy back who got a lot of carries at the beginning of the season before suffering an injury, but they really haven't missed a beat since Guerrendo has also stepped up as a more straight line runner who's a bit harder to bring down in space. All this success in the run game has allowed them to design a passing game that's pretty easy to operate for transfer quarterback Jack Plummer. Most of his passes are shorter, just trying to get the ball in the hands of some of their electric receivers. One particular name to watch out for is Jamari Thrash, who has more than double the targets of any other receiver on the team. Ultimately, this offense has found a lot of success because Brian Brohm puts his athletes in good position, and they've got athletes at every position. Really, the only thing that's consistently slowed this offense down is when they get into situations where they turn the ball over. And particularly, the problem has been when Jack Plummer throws interceptions. He's a fairly accurate quarterback, actually one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the country. It seems to me he gets in the most trouble when he tries to anticipate routes and he's just not on the same page as the receivers. This happened a couple of times against Pitt, and that's probably a product of him being a transfer and not having a ton of time to develop chemistry with these receivers. I think FSU's goal should be to speed up his clock and force these kind of rushed throws where he's either throwing off a back foot or trying to anticipate these routes cutting before they actually do. One of the things that makes this Louisville team so tricky is that while they do have a good offense, their defense is probably even better. And just like their offense, it starts and stops with the run game. Louisville plays a lot of one-high coverages, and while they occasionally mix in some two-high stuff, they like to focus on stopping the run. These one-high coverages allow them to have an extra number in the box to really account for the run. On top of that, probably the best player on the whole team is a run-stopping specialist defensive end who isn't so bad at pass rushing either, with 12 sacks on the season. Ashton Jaloti is a force to be reckoned with, and he has a fair amount of help on the defensive line. Behind their front is a fairly decent secondary who's fared well on the season, but I think that's where you want to exploit this team if there's any place to do it. One weird thing I ran into while researching this team in particular is that they struggle against crossing routes. When crossing routes were targeted, they were 124th in yards per play allowed, 127th in points per play allowed, and 126th in passer rating allowed. And that's not off a terribly small sample size either. I think a lot of this has to do with how they play their zone coverage. You can see here, I think they're playing some kind of zone match, which means that they should be communicating as this crosser passes their faces, and he comes free on the other side of the backers. Again, this is a communication thing, just like Jack Plummer's interceptions in the offense. I think this might have to do with the new coaching staff and getting used to how the terminology and the communication works. I think FSU should be able to take advantage of this, Along with crossing routes, I think they tend to struggle with things like end arounds, which get them flowing one way and then back the other way, and again, take advantage of some of these communication issues that might be happening on the second level of the defense. But ultimately, you'll only be able to take advantage of that a couple of times in a game. Florida State has to be able to establish the run, and Louisville's been pretty darn good at keeping teams from doing that. If FSU's unable to get things going, then it puts extra pressure on Tate Rodemaker in his second start this season. And we saw in his first ever start, when the running game wasn't working, he wasn't able to pick up the team by himself. Ultimately, this is a tough matchup for Florida State. It's a game I can really see going either way. Whoever controls the line of scrimmage on that side of the ball has a pretty good chance of coming away with this one. Another thing to watch is Louisville's wins and losses really follow whether they win or lose the turnover battle. And while that's not a huge surprise, it's kind of interesting that they had 3 turnovers in both their loss to Pittsburgh and Kentucky. And those were big swing factors that allowed them to lose that game. I think both teams have a legitimate shot here, and they both have a lot to play for. If Louisville wins, it'll be their first ever ACC championship. If Florida State comes away with it, they're most likely heading to the college football playoff. Thanks for watching. If you're a Louisville fan, let me know how I did in the comments below. If there's anything I missed about your team, I would love to learn more. If you're a Florida State fan, please like and subscribe, and meet me over on Noles247 where we'll further the conversation. Thanks.